All right, guys, good evening. It is Tuesday night. It is our time of the week for another conversation with Commodores. And I am so pleased to have Tommy Openshaw as my guest tonight. Good evening, Tommy. How are you doing tonight, bud?
Hey, evening. Good. How are you doing?
Doing well. And I sure appreciate you taking a few minutes tonight from your regular responsibilities and hanging out with us and reliving some good old days. And for those few of you who don't remember, Tommy just played during the Mason time period. Did you play for Franklin as well, maybe a year or so?
My freshman year. I was with
The end of the Franklin era and the rest of the time, 2013 to 17, he was a kicking specialist. And we're going to get into all of that in a few minutes. But Tommy, tell us a little bit about your current situation, because there's a lot of folks out there. When I put the promo, the tease of what was going on in your world, I got all kind of messages that they were going to be coming on tonight to find out more. So tell us what you're doing these days.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm a flight student in the Navy. I joined the Navy about coming up on 2 years now. I was an OCS guy, officer candidate school, went to that like 2 weeks before COVID hit. So that was kind of a crazy time to be locked away on this base in Rhode Island, and then the whole world shuts down outside of it. So I spent my first 7 months at Pensacola. I've been in Corpus Christi, Texas for the last year. I just finished my primary flight training, which is in an aircraft called the T6 Texan. It's like a two-seater front and back with an instructor behind you. Bubble shield. It kind of is like a modern P-51 Mustang, if anybody knows, what those look like from World War II. So super cool aircraft, very powerful, 1,100 horsepower engine, and can do aerobatics and all sorts of stuff like that. Pressurized cockpit, had the whole flight gear, the helmet, the oxygen mask, ejection seat, and all that. So that was a lot of fun, really cool. And I am actually on Friday starting classes for my advanced training, which will be in the T-44, which is a King Air multi-engine. So 2 turboprop engines, aircraft. That'll be about 6 months of training. And after that, I'll get my wings as a naval aviator.
Oh, how exciting for you. That's so awesome that you're doing this. And it's such a noble profession and undertaking. Where did or when did the idea of joining the military, joining the Navy, come across your thought process?
Yeah, so I actually, back in high school, I narrowed it down to Vanderbilt and the Naval Academy, were the two schools I was looking at playing for. My parents are both Naval Academy grads, and my grandpa, my uncle, so a lot of Academy grads.
Wait,
in my family.
how did you back up? How did you get out of the tradition of going to the Naval Academy and end up at Vanderbilt? I realize this may be a bigger topic, but I'm always fascinated by stuff like this.
Yeah, so I think Navy recruits in a very unique way because they don't have scholarships. So they can really bring in as many people as they want, and then they can send you to NAPS, which is like a prep school that's in Rhode Island, which is like the Academy's version of like a red shirt. I think they brought in like 7 kickers the year I was getting recruited. So it was like, it's cool. Like I could have gone and played for, the team I grew up cheering for. But there wasn't a whole lot like, hey, you're our guy, we want you to come here. It was like they saw me as like a good kicker, and like, oh, his parents are Academy grads, easy money, give him a scholarship or an offer, and we'll see if he ends up. But whereas Coach Franklin's the best recruiter in all of college football, for as far as I understand. He really took a lot of time getting to know me, my family, my parents, my sisters. I made it very clear they wanted me specifically to come be their kicker. And honestly, my parents kind of pushed me away from the Academy slightly. I think they just wanted me to not feel the pressure of the family tradition of going there. They wanted me to make my own decision.
Awesome.
And yeah, SEC football was just too good of an opportunity to pass up. And I was getting a great education at Vandy anyway, so it's not like I was missing out on that.
Well, I was going to say, it's not like you went to a slouch school instead of the Naval Academy. Tommy, Gary Veach says to tell you hello. Says, looking good.
Gary, how's it going?
Well, you make the decision ultimately to come to Vanderbilt, and of course, we all know that Coach Franklin was a fantastic recruiter. When you got to campus, were you surprised by something or anything, or was it as you thought it was going to be? And what I mean by that, the roster, what was expected of you on the team, college life as a kicker, a kicking specialist. We all have the adjustment period, but what kind of surprises were you in for?
Yeah, that first summer was uh, very memorable for a lot of reasons. I know the first week of workouts was, I still think one of the best things that I don't know how many programs across country do it. We kind of got away from it towards the end for, I'm sure, reasons that I didn't understand. But as newly recruited freshmen, we were thrown in with the rest of the team going through the exact same workouts from the get go. And that was brutal because, Dwight Gall was a strength coach. And he, I think, has a reputation for being an incredible guy and all the players love him, but he will destroy you in a workout. So I remember like a lot of us were questioning, is college football the right thing for us? Because that first week, I think, was intentionally like a hell week to try to get you ready, to be an SEC football player. I remember seeing like 4-star recruits like struggling with drills, after having just spent like an hour in the sand pits, going to the stadium and running stadiums with 40-pound plates. I remember seeing Jordan Matthews having a 40-pound plate carried on him, running up steps, skipping steps. Meanwhile, I'm like crawling up, barely able to suck wind. So yeah, it was a shell shock for sure. And it's also like, obviously, thankfully the university has like improved and moved past a lot of the past struggles, but that was also, 3 weeks into me being at Vandy, we had that big rape case that came out, and I was like, holy cow, like this is nothing like I'm used to, obviously coming from high school. So that was, a lot of reasons why that first introduction to SEC football was pretty crazy.
Yeah, you were thrown in really quick. Now, coming out of Jacksonville Creekside High School, did y'all have workout programs? Did you have weight training and the like? I realized when you got to Vanderbilt, it was ramped way up, or at least I assume it was, compared to the usual high school situation. But being a kicking specialist, I guess I should ask, did you play other positions in high school? Did you participate in workouts like the average athlete did on the team?
Yeah, so that was always a goal of mine from day one of football, was to never be a kicker. It just that's the talent that God gave me, is to kick a football, but that's definitely not the mentality or the enjoyment I got out of football. So yeah, throughout all of high school, unfortunately, like I was pretty much the same height, 6'2" from the get go. But I was about 160 pounds, so I was not built to play any other position on the field. I gave wide receiver, a couple looks in JV, and then a little bit in the beginning of varsity. But my lanky body and my athleticism had not grown into my lanky body yet. So I kind of stuck to kicking and punting. But I was there. Yeah, we had winter workouts, summer workouts. I was there for all of it. I was doing my best to push myself and my teammates. Put muscle on my skinny little frame, try to eat as much as I could. And I just could not gain weight till I got to college. But yeah, so the mindset of workouts and weightlifting was there from high school. Thankfully, my high school coach was great in that, and he really pushed us in those ways.
Well, that's good. That gave you, and I wouldn't say a head start or a leg up, if you will, but it certainly kept you from being even further behind, just being a freshman coming in there. Billy Smith, one of the beloved Keystone Cops, says you're one of the best, says to tell you.
Appreciate it.
Tommy, you come in the fall of 13. How many other kickers came in with you, or how many other kicking specialists were already on the roster?
Yeah, so Kerry Spear was the starter my freshman year. He was still probably the best example of like senior leadership you can have on a football team. Took me under his wing, always outside of football as well, making sure like I'm included in things like, inviting me to the team going to the lake, or, just stuff on the weekend that you kind of need freshmen to get involved in so they can feel more at home. And then I got brought in with a guy named David Holtgrave, who was a walk-on. So it's just, I think if I remember correctly, it was just the three of us. So Kerry, me, and David. And I fortunately was able to travel with the team that freshman year. I was redshirting, but I was, essentially the backup if Kerry got hurt.
Yeah. Well, in that fall of 13 became it was Franklin, ended up being Franklin's last year. And it was a very tough, from a news and program standpoint, with the rape case that was going on or had just broken. I guess I want to take you back to that for just a few minutes. Did it ever dawn or occur to you personally that maybe you'd want to transfer away from all of this mess and go find a school that was less in the news for these reasons?
I think I never wanted to leave Vandy for any of the notoriety or scandal or controversy that came with that. I think at one point I was just struggling with like making friends and feeling. I honestly, it was so long ago, I can't remember. I know I spoke to Eugene
You're
Henderson,
not
who was
you're not that old, Tommy.
it was, yeah, my freshman year was 9 years ago now. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. I remember speaking to our academic advisor, Eugene, briefly about like, oh, like, I don't know, like if this is the right spot, like, do I want to transfer actually to the Naval Academy? I think honestly, it was right around the week of the Army Navy game, which I think still is, it's never, not a regret, but it's still like one game I wish I could have participated in throughout my whole football career. So, but that was pretty brief. I remember like looking into that for maybe a week, and that was about it. I think I was like probably struggling with kicking, and like David was like doing much better than me, and it was typical freshman growing pains of trying to learn how to be.
I was going to say it sounds like you were dealing with the typical freshman doubts, whether it was your athletic confidence. I don't know about your academics, and I'm going to ask about that in just a second. About that transition sometimes takes a while, but I think a lot of freshmen go through that. So the rape case really wasn't a big factor for you in this issue. But I want to ask on a bigger scale question: was there a lot of conversation about that amongst the team in the clubhouse or locker room, or just everyday conversation, or was it really a hushed, non-discussed issue? Because there was several people involved, and they were former teammates of people who were currently on the roster. Maybe not your friends because they were older, but certainly friends of yours, friends.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I honestly don't remember a whole lot about conversations during the locker room. I know, like, obviously it was talked about, like Franklin talked to us, at extent about like what, trying to give us information as it happened, how to handle it, like what's the policy with media, all like that. My memory at least is that, as far as the staff is concerned, they were very upfront and honest with us about what was going on, like who the players involved were. And I did not, I think there's 4, but I remember like kind of the ringleader was I knew him better just because he was in my recruiting visit with me. He was a JUCO transfer. And I think my memory from the get-go is he definitely was like the only guy that struck me, as far as everyone I met on the team, he struck me as there's something wrong with this guy. So of course, for me to find out that it was kind of his lead on everything didn't really surprise me. But
well, we can certainly go past. That's not the focus of our talk for this evening, but it's certainly a black eye in our program's history. That's for sure. But let's move on to something bigger and better. Let's talk about your freshman year. Did you get any playing time? Were you redshirted? You said you traveled, but I didn't know if you had gotten any game action that year.
Yeah, no, I didn't play in any games. I want to say at that point the rule is still like 1 snap and my red shirt would have been burned, which of course is different now. But I got to travel to all the away games, which I think was really, really good for my growing experience, because I got to see Kerry, especially how he prepared for games, like the day before, the day of, how he practiced, like how he handled himself on the sideline, all just like incredible learning opportunities, and like no one better to learn it from. So.
During that time period, or during your career at Vanderbilt, did we play any of the military academies? Because historically, I know we always have.
Right. I don't think so. I know Vandy played West Point maybe a couple years before I got there, but no, not while I was there.
Yeah, we played during my time period as well. I played in the late 80s, and there is no more beautiful campus to me in November, even though you're standing on the sidelines and freezing because it's now snowing, than being up at West Point. It truly is a spectacular place. But going back to the Army Navy game, if you're a college football fan or a fan of sport in general, going to that game, which I think is still played in Philadelphia each year, it has to be on your bucket list. It certainly is for me. I'm really, really hoping that I get to go. I know that maybe your family has been in the past, just with your parents and families graduating there, but that's got to be a cool experience going to that game in particular.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. I've been probably to 4 or 5 of them now.
Oh, wow.
And if you get like super lucky, you get in a snow game, even though
Uh-huh.
it might be cold in the stands, but just the atmosphere that sets is pretty amazing. Although, the worse the weather, the less chance you get to see some F-18s do a flyover. So, you give and take some.
That's right. But I'm listening to your mindset. If you're lucky, it's a snow game. Not for me, buddy. Not
Yeah.
for me. And
Yeah.
your mindset growing up in Jacksonville has got to have changed, or maybe it
Oh
was
yeah.
always set to a little bit colder than what the temperature really is. Guys, I'm talking with Tommy Openshaw. He kicked during Franklin's last year and during Mason's time period, graduated in 2017. And he's just doing some awesome things these days. But we're going to stay on the academic side. Tommy, was Creekside a strong high school education? Was it just middle of the road? Did it prepare you? And how was the transition to the Vanderbilt academic load your freshman year?
Yeah, Creekside was a great school. I think the reason my parents chose St. Johns County specifically when we moved up to Jacksonville was because it was at the time ranked the #1 public school district in the state of Florida. So yeah, I was definitely very supported throughout my high school, education. I was always had the access to AP classes, stuff like that. And I think also just like very blessed with school came a little bit easier for me as well. So as far as transitioning to Vandy, obviously Vandy is a very challenging academic school, and I still struggled with transitioning because for most of high school I didn't really have to spend a whole lot of time studying at home, whereas that is not the case at Vandy, and not for the classes I was taking at least. But after first year, second year, I really started to get the hang of it and figuring out the best way to manage my time throughout the day.
One of the things that I'm always curious, I've always really disliked whenever someone says, well, kickers and kicking specialists, they're not real athletes. I think that's garbage. But one of the things that I've always noticed, because I held for extra points and field goals for a couple of years, my time at Vanderbilt, is the kicking specialists really spend so much of their time isolated working on their craft from the rest of the team until the coach says, all right, quick, we got to work on some special teams. And then maybe the last 10 minutes of practice, you're actually with the rest of the team. So what I want to ask you, Tommy, is the mindset of a kicker on a day-to-day basis working on his and now her craft about place kicking. It's got to be lonely at times. It's got to be single focused, I would assume. But take us through a little bit of the off season work that you do, because it's not just weights and running and things. You're actually doing some of your mechanics. So take us to their off-season mindset of a kicking specialist.
Yeah, off-season definitely is more challenging from the kicking side because you don't have this team scheduled time to go work on kicking every day. Their team scheduled time is weightlifting and sprints in the field, whatever you're doing. So if you want to kick, you got to schedule that in your own time, and then you got to figure out, okay, is this going to be me out there kicking by myself and chasing the balls, or is this going to be we can get the whole specialist group out there, especially in the spring and stuff, because that's the time where people take the weird timed classes and have their different priorities they're looking at doing. So it's really tough to get the whole group out there. So yeah, it takes a lot. Sometimes if you're lucky, you can get the camera guy to film you and go watch film on yourself from working technique in the off season. But for the most part, I was propping up my phone on a cup of water or something behind me and trying to use, I think Huddle had this really good app at the time that lets you slow-mo all your videos and review that. But,
you young guys with all this technology, we
yeah,
really didn't have any of that. But what about your request to the coaching staff? Hey, can y'all cut the lights on tonight for me, just for me? Did you ever need to make that request? Was it granted? Was it, no, we can't do it, it's too expensive? Or what was the approach when you guys needed some lights at night?
I think for one, we didn't really practice a whole lot at night. I think personally, if we were going to do anything at night, thankfully we had the indoor facility just up the hill from McGugin, and they always had lights on. You'd be fighting rec leagues or the women's soccer team or whatever other sports, using time in there for space. But for the most part, at least I was able to get most of my work done in the daylights. Never really had to ask for the lights. I I honestly don't know what the answer would have been if I asked him to turn on the stadium lights just for me. But
you never know. You never know. But
yeah,
let's take it now during the summer and then into the fall during the season itself. You do so much of this work by yourself. I realize you've got the tees that you can put the ball to do your kicks, but there's nothing that takes away, excuse me, there's nothing that replaces the timing of the snap, the hold, and the kick. You don't get that, I would assume, until the summertime.
Yeah.
So during the summer, during the fall, Tommy, when are you improving your skill, or is that continual all through the year?
Yeah, it's definitely continual. I think like there's different things that you focus on at different points of the year. So just like you're saying, there's less time with a snapper, a holder, or like off times in the off season, especially in the spring. So a lot of that's just like working individual mechanics on like your approach to the ball, your swing, all this specific like nitty gritty stuff with kicking. And then you get some time with your snapper and your holder. It's like, okay, now I'm working on having a person hold the ball versus a little tripod, because that is like, significantly different experience kicking a football with someone holding it versus a little stick, because, the hold might be more or less the same, but now you got a body right there that your mind subconsciously like wants to not run into. And so you can have a lot of like weird technique stuff kind of creep in where like you start subconsciously like moving away or shifting your body weight away from that person right there, which can throw off the whole kick. And then you get into the fall where you can have the rest of the offensive line there. You can have the defense rushing you, and that's when you really work on getting that off time quick enough.
You hear in Major League Baseball, certain starting pitchers have their catcher, the catcher that catches them the most, they're most comfortable with them. Was that true with you with place kicking with a particular holder? Or did you have more confidence in a certain guy that you just knew that it was always going to be at the right angle, no laces, etc.? Or did that not necessarily develop during your time at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I don't really know how it was for most of the other kickers across the country. I, fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to spit it, I had 5 holders in my 4 years, mostly from graduations. Like every time I had a holder, they graduated, and it was always a new guy. So trying to see if I can remember all of them. Taylor Hudson my first year, then Chris Quintera, Wilson Johnson, and then Reed Nelson, and then Ronald Monroe did a little bit as well.
Wow.
And yeah, I would not allow a guy, and thankfully, special teams coaches gave me a lot of control over who I wanted holding the ball, which was incredible. Because like if I'm not comfortable with them, I'm not comfortable kicking a football. I'm not going to be comfortable trying to make one in the game. So most of the guys I picked, I guess 3 of those 5 were specialists, which I think is just extremely important because they're right there with you all practice. So you can spend all practice working with them. Whereas like when I was with Chris, he was a wide receiver. So I only got to work with him during special teams period and a little bit before practice. He was great at it, but I just didn't get as many reps with him as I did with like Reed, Wilson, or Taylor. So yeah, it's definitely like specialists are very picky about who they want being the holder for them.
For years, there's been a National Collegiate Kickers Award every year. But have you seen, I'm sure you know this, the last several years, there's actually now a specialist of the year for holders. And I think that's just that's so cool they get recognized, because they sure get recognized if they flub the hold or miss the snap or screw something up. That's for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
So Tommy, let's talk a little bit about the locker room, the culture in the locker room. And I'm not talking about specifically about that case that we were talking about. I'm just talking about in general. What made for a good locker room, a good clubhouse during your years? Who were some of the guys on the team that you could always, like Kenny Simon, who's older than you, he was always known as a really loose, and he knew how to just pump up his teammates. Always funny guy. Every good team has those guys. Every good team also has its leaders, who are the quiet leaders and then the loud leaders. During your years, particularly your junior and senior years, your last couple of years, did you have those guys? You have the jokesters. Did you have the team leaders, the guys who kept everybody together?
Yeah, definitely. I think like any team, there was, over my 5 years, there's kind of a waves of like the quality of leadership and like just the culture of the locker room. But those last years, I remember the most because they're most recent, and there was a lot of the guys I went through Vandy with were the older guys, the seniors and the leaders. My memory at least was that it was a very, very good locker room, great culture, like guys got along super well. If there were arguments, like they were handled like pretty like as well as you can hope an argument to handle between football players. Guys like Oren Burks is like still one of the best guys I think to ever go through Vandy. Jay Woods, Jonathan Wynn, Kari Blasingame, Ralph, who I like got to spend I think 4 of our 5 years right next to each other in the locker room. He may not agree that that was enjoyable for him, but I definitely enjoyed it.
2 of those guys just played this past Sunday in playoff games.
Yeah,
and Blasingame's teams, unfortunately, they both lost, but it shows the quality of the athletes that they are to be in the NFL still.
Definitely. Yeah, we had so many great guys come through during my time. A lot of them are playing the NFL still, even if it's small roles, big roles. It kind of just goes to show you how much talent we have, like Zach Cunningham, Trent Sherfield, 2 guys that are on teams. Yeah, a lot of talent.
A lot of talent. I want to welcome, speaking of talent, Gerald Collins and Joe Staley are watching with us right now. I've got Tommy Openshaw. We're running through his last, it was Franklin's last year and Mason's first few years. And what a big contrast in personalities. While I never played for either man, I got to meet them both briefly and certainly followed them their years at Vanderbilt. What was for you? There may or may not have been a big difference from a culture standpoint, but can you compare them a little bit? I know that Franklin recruited you, but you were there for the rest of your career with Coach Mason.
Yeah. Yeah, I only had, the summer and the fall of Franklin. So I don't think I got the full experience with him as I did with Mason, but it definitely was like they are 2 very different people. For better or for worse, they're just different. And I obviously had spent 4 years with Coach Mason and had a lot of experience with him, and just like the culture of the locker room ebbed and flowed, so like it kind of extends to the whole team. And I think they prioritize different things. My short experience with Franklin, I definitely felt like he was much more like just like a general manager of everything. Whereas Mason, at least in the beginning, was much more like football specifically related, and then his roles and like expertise. And I think that was his first head coaching job too. You can kind of see as he like grew with the program, like Coach Mason was taking on more responsibilities and being involved in more things, and hiring more people to take away like the small things that kind of head coach didn't need to waste his time on. So.
It did seem that way. His first couple of years, it seemed like the position he grew into the position. It was a little big for a first time head coaching job to come from out west to be thrown into the wolves, if you will, in the SEC. That's for sure. Well, let's go on the field for just a little bit, Tommy, and talk a little bit about some of your memories from playing. Were there certain games, certain situations, maybe certain teammates or oppositions who really just have stuck in your memory over the years?
I definitely have, unfortunately, a lot of memories of bad kicks. Those are the ones that seem to stick in my brain more. Thankfully, I don't get like upset thinking about them anymore. But I remember the bad memories. I remember a lot of the good ones too. I remember like the overtime win against Western Kentucky, which like God knows why we were going to overtime to beat Western Kentucky, but we won. That's all that matters. I remember beating Florida my freshman year. As growing up as a Gator fan, even though I didn't play, that was really exciting. I remember beating every time we beat Tennessee. I remember beating Tennessee because, despise those guys. They're the worst. But.
Anybody and everybody who's ever been on this show remembers the years they beat Tennessee.
Yeah,
that'll never go away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I remember specifically. I don't know what it was, but Missouri, Florida, and Tennessee, I feel like we're always the like. I don't want to say dirtiest because they weren't necessarily a dirty team, but just like always talk the most, like just the most unpleasant team to play. Their guys always just seemed like they were just not the best dudes to be playing against.
We know what Tennessee is. We know about those guys.
Right. They're in their own thing.
You know about the Florida guys, and if I had to wear jorts all the time, I'd probably feel that way too.
Yeah.
I have no context with Missouri. They were not in the league when I was coming through, so we never played them in any sports. But maybe it's an inferiority complex.
Maybe
coming into the league. Well, Tommy, I want to talk about the mindset again of a kicker. The first thing you mentioned were the misses. And whether you're a head coach and you remember your losses, or you're a quarterback and you remember your interceptions, or you're a kicker and you remember your misses. I know you remember lots and lots of made kicks, but what is it about the misses that kind of stick with you? And what do you learn from that? Because you have to have a short memory. You can't, I would assume you can't dwell on the previous missed kick to have confidence going to the next kick.
Right. I think like thankfully there were a lot more made kicks than missed kicks, so it's kind of those blend together a lot more. Unfortunately, I don't think I even had the chance as like a game-ending last-minute kick to win the game. So I don't have like this great grand like experience in my head from that. But I think the missed kicks, I definitely so I worked a lot with the sports psychologist as well as Vicky Woosley, just because like you're saying, kicking is a very mental position, a very mental part of the game. And I'm I think more than average. I'm pretty critical of myself, and I like want perfection, and like I get in my own. I definitely get in the early in my career got in my own head a lot from just misses, whatever it may be, bad practices leading into the game, stuff like that. But I think like the misses that I remember explicitly are the ones that like I know I could have done something, like I know exactly why I missed it, and I know what I could have done just slightly different to make it, and you can't change that. So I don't know if it's just because like I have a really good memory for all those things. I'm able to like I was able to break down every single thing that happened on every kick I took on a game like the following week, and so those little things stick out more and just like are easier for me to like point at, because the things when you make a kick, it's like, okay, yeah, I could have kicked it better, but it went in, so who cares? You don't get as critical with yourself.
Well, Tommy, what about muscle memory? How important is muscle memory to a kicker?
Oh, it's extremely important. Yeah, like in a game, thoughts go out the window. It is just like you're blacked out there. You watch the team driving down, you're getting warmed up, you're thinking about your technique and all that. But as soon as you hear a field goal, it's just like you can't think about like anything specific like that. So you have to practice enough to where your body just knows what to do. And you also have to practice in a way that gets you like as close to a game time like feeling as possible. Whether that being like limiting the number of kicks you get to take at practice, because you miss a kick and while you're out there by yourself, who cares? You can go get 10 more balls and keep kicking and make yourself feel better about making kicks. Can't do that in the game. So if you say, hey, I'm taking 10 kicks today at practice, or in off season, whatever, I'm going by myself, and I say I'm only taking 10 kicks today, that's all I get. I got to make those count. I can't just like keep kicking until I feel better about myself.
What about what I would think would be a total contrast? Again, I don't have experience being a place kicker, but I did some punting in college. It's a completely different physical action. The ball is being struck at a completely different angle. Your leg is different, I would assume. How do you go from one to the other, maybe even in the same day or the same game? I don't know if you ever handled both in the same day, but how do you turn on your punter head, your mentality, and turn off the kicker or vice versa in a short period of time?
Yeah. So actually, I think it was 2015. I did punted the whole season as well as did place kicking. That was very difficult. I think that was, I definitely remember that being like a pretty inaccurate year for kicking. And I had the most punts in the SEC, just I think by nature of how bad our offense was that year as well. So yeah, it's very difficult. You got the athleticness of the leg that kind of translates, but it's a very different swing, very different technique, different like things you're thinking about. It's like learning a whole new skill pretty much. So yeah, it's tough. I'm watching the team start at the 20-yard line. I'm like, okay, at this point I could be punting. Okay, they cross the 50. Now I'm in between. Are they going to get to the field goal range, or are they going to punt? So what am I practicing at the net? What am I warming up for? What am I like mentally preparing for? Meanwhile, I got to like fight off the backups that are out, or not the other guys that are trying to get warm ups in the net. Like, hey, you got to leave, man. Like, I need to get warmed up. So yeah, it's really tough. And I'm going to
assume, Tommy, you're not changing shoes during the game based on which kick you're going to do.
No, I think I changed shoes once at halftime because it was soaking wet, and I don't like kicking in wet shoes. But I'm not kicking with different cleats. So
in Power 5 these days, you did that 7 seasons ago. How often does a school have one fella do both jobs during a whole season. Do you see that much these
No,
days?
not at all. I think that year it was me and the dude from Oklahoma. We're the only two in the country that were doing both for the whole season.
Wow.
Yeah, and I couldn't really point to many guys that have done that since. I'm not, paying as close attention, but
Now, are you a flexible guy? Are you into yoga, Pilates, and all of that? Or did you really? Because I know that with punting, with you being 6'2" and have a not slender, but you have an athletic build, you've got to get a lot of flexibility with that kick on your follow through. I get that. How flexible a guy were you compared to other kickers who you
not
knew?
not good. I am naturally not flexible. It took a lot of work to get to touch my toes essentially. So
Wow.
yeah, I think punters need to be able to do like splits and be flexible. And I was like, the Band-Aid punter. I just filled in because the guy who was supposed to start had a really, really rough camp. And they really didn't have any choice but to put me in. So yeah, that definitely did not help. I tried my hardest, but I was naturally very inflexible.
Well, I know I don't know if you've met Jim Arnold or Ricky Anderson or any of the punters from years past who've done so well, but just to see their photos of the extension on their kicks, it's just always is amazing to me. And I never know, I always have to ask if they're naturally that flexible or if it's something they've really had to work on, and most have to work on it continually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, it goes away really quick. I don't know if I can touch my toes now, but
Well, do you have to touch your toes much when you're in one of those jets?
oh yeah, the jets are tiny. I mean, I don't know how much flexibility helps with that, but even I'm 6'2", like 200 now, and I'm like barely squeezed in those 260s.
Wow.
I think I just made the cut for the legal limits for Navy pilots. But
Wow. Well, guys, I'm talking with Tommy Openshaw. We're kind of getting in the weeds a little bit with kicking, but I want to back up just a little bit, Tommy, and ask you. It's easy from our conversation that I'm hearing from you of lessons that you've learned along the way, just being an athlete, and then more specifically as being a kicking specialist. Now you're in the military, you've graduated from Vanderbilt, you've found your career, and you're moving forward. You're progressing through the next steps. But on a day-to-day basis, it's not all this awesomeness and things that we see and up in it's the minutia. It's the details of anything that a person does in life. Mastering those details leads to success. So here's my question, and this may be a stretch, but let's see if you can stay with me. Let's see if I can ask it correctly. Okay. With kicking, there are so many specific details to be a successful kicker. A person who doesn't have that experience and we just watch you do what you do, oh, no big deal. Swings his leg through, make sure it's straight. It's good. You had to have learned all of that during your years, and probably in middle school, high school, and then through 10 years, I'm going to say, of kicking. But now you've almost started over, if you will, with your new profession. My question, I'm finally getting to it. How do you take any of what you learned being an athlete to now translating or helping you with now being a pilot? Is there a correlation at all there for you?
Yeah, I think there's a huge correlation. I see the skills I learned from not only playing football but being a kicker come out in learning how to fly a plane, especially like a military plane, all the time. Whether it's the way you learn, the way you study, the way you approach performance. I think that's a huge one. I learned, like we talked about earlier, I failed a lot and I learned a lot from those failures. I learned a lot of perspective. I learned how to take them as learning lessons and not as reflections of like who I am as a person. And especially in flight school, which is the first half at least is a weeding out process. It's a very difficult program to get people who are not capable of being military pilots out of the program. And so like learning, okay, I learned all these nitty gritty little technique things about kicking, same way I learned all these nitty gritty little technique things about flying. I learned like all these specific little ditties and ways to help you remember things. But once you get up in the plane and you're going, that plane goes up to 240 knots and you got all this chatter on the comms, you got the instructor in your ear. And, for me, I got really airsick my first like 5 or 6 flights. So I'm like fighting off puking my guts out up there as well. And there's a lot of factors that like are trying to get you away from all the work you do on the ground. Same with football. You do all this work in the week in the film room, on the practice field to perform the game. It's the same way with flying. So yeah, I think there's a ton that I've taken from football that helps me being a better pilot. And I saw that kind of get reflected in grades and like performance and like the way I interacted with instructors. I think I learned more from football than I have from the military. Granted, it's only been year and a half, and I'm yet to go out into the fleet and do most of my service. But yeah, I think being an athlete puts me on a huge advantage with learning how to fly a plane.
I bet that it does. And I bet his ears were burning. We want to welcome Jim Arnold to the program. Of course, my guest is Tommy Openshaw. Tommy, let's talk about muscle memory being a pilot. Have you noticed, is it starting to sink in a little bit? Are you becoming more comfortable? Are things starting to become a little bit more second nature for you?
Yeah. So by the end of my primary flight training, I just kind of randomly got selected for this prototype training syllabus that the Navy is starting to use. They called it the Avenger Program, named after the World War II fighter plane, not the Marvel movie. We were the second iteration of it. So there's 12 of us that went through, which I thought was amazing. This like kind of tight knit group with, they had, I don't even remember how many instructors they had, like 7 or 8, and the 12 of us. So all of our flights were with them. Wow. Whereas normally it's like the whole squadron. So you're kind of mixing and matching who you're flying with. But they also, we learned every single thing about flying. Well, everything that we would learn in primary, we learned before we ever got in the plane. So it was just like, learning by a water hose. But, actually getting through the program, and towards the end, they did this thing called mission phase, where it's kind of like a culmination of all of everything we learned so far. We have to get regraded on everything. We're doing these really weird, they call them special syllabus requirements, like weird requirements, like, hey, you have to take off as like a formation flight, split your flight with air traffic control, go into 2 different working areas, do all your aerobatics, and then rejoin as a flight, doing like a rendezvous technique over this airfield, and then do an emergency landing as a formation into this airfield. Like super weird stuff that the normal syllabus students would never do. But it gave us the confidence to like, hey, like, that's what they want to teach us. Like, hey, like flying is not going to be like everything's perfect by the book. This is exactly what's going to happen every time. Right. They want you to teach you like, this is what you should look for. And then you apply what you know to specific situations. So yeah, by the end of it, I was very comfortable up there. Like still things I'm learning. Of course, I'm not like by no means an expert. I have only like 70 flight hours. But like a lot of the stuff that in the beginning was like, how am I ever going to learn this? By then it was like not even thinking about it, second nature.
Well, there's only so much you can control. Much like kicking, you can't control the weather when you're up there. You've just got to learn how to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And with kicking, you've got to adjust. Anyway, there's a lot of parallels I'm seeing now. Now, 2 last questions of talking about this, and we're close to the end. Are there any other Vanderbilt grads who are with you or that you've met along the way in the last year and a half?
No Vandy grads I've met yet. Yeah, I'm sure there's some ROTC kids. I didn't know any ROTC guys going through Vandy, and obviously not any ones that have been graduating recently. But yeah, I haven't met any Vandy guys yet.
Are you one of the older students at this point, or are you is it about the average age of the guys and women who are going through your program?
I'd say I'm like 1.5 years to 2 years older than the majority of folks, because a lot of them you got to like, it's Naval Academy grads, ROTC grads, and OCS grads. And so Navy or the Academy and ROTC are all, coming right after college, whereas I had 3 years after college before going to OCS. One of my buddies is 29, I'm 27, so he's a couple years older than me. There's another guy in that class who's 30. So, there's definitely folks who are my age or older. But
so you're not grandpa in the group by any stretch.
Not yet.
But are you known for being from Vanderbilt or being a kicker? Have they nicknamed you in something that you could share with us on the show?
Yeah, no, thankfully, I hope I never get a nickname or a call sign that's related to being a kicker. All my instructors and my students in this like Avenger program knew that's my background.
Yeah.
But most of the instructors called me Opie, which is just, short for my last name.
Sure.
I don't know how that started, but that was actually what my dad was called when he was in the Navy too. So that's kind of funny. But
That is interesting. That's a good coincidence. Guys, I'm talking with Tommy Openshaw. We've got just a couple of more minutes, and I sure appreciate him spending some time with us coming out of Corpus Christi. He's doing some really cool things. And Tommy, you said, I think maybe pregame before we went live, that I think you had gone into the Kentucky game this year. Now, you haven't been away from the game that long. You haven't been away from campus that long, but you've done a lot in the last 5 years since you have been gone. What was different? Did you feel old? Did you feel like you had just left? What was the feelings when you were on the field, when you were being recognized pregame as an honorary captain that game?
Yeah, it was definitely weird because, like we talked about, most of the people that I know from Vandy are gone. There's like 3 or 4 staff members left that I am familiar with. So it definitely felt like, I was trying to figure, kind of gravitating towards the people I knew to be comfortable with and hang out with them. But all the staff members that I did get to meet were very, very welcoming, they were amazing. I got to meet Coach Lee, and he was awesome. I got to talk to him for like 5-10 minutes in the middle of practice on Friday. He came over and introduced himself and told me kind of like what was going on. Obviously he played at Vandy, so like he's one of us. But told me the kind of like their plan, the status of the program, stuff like that, things they're looking at doing. So yeah, I had a great time getting to see the whole, just complete turnover from when I was last there. And I think the program's in good hands for sure.
Last question for you. I don't know if you've thought about this, but I hope you have. Could there ever be an occasion where you could be part of a flyover in a pregame for a Vanderbilt home game?
That was my dream. I actually asked instructors if we have a cross country flight as part of our training. It's like, can we go to Nashville? Because I want to do a flyover for a game. We actually looked at Nashville. We ended up going to Dallas. That's a whole long story. Don't get me started on how bummed I was on that. But I don't know. I'm going to be flying to P8, which is a Boeing 737. And I don't think the FAA is going to let anyone fly that low. So I don't know if my dream will come true from that. But maybe in like 5 years from now, when I get to go back as an instructor, I can swing that and see if I can put something to work for that.
Well,
but
maybe by then you'll have some pull and you'll be able to figure it out. Hopefully by then Coach Lee's got us in continual bowl seasons. Things are rolling. But Tommy, I want to thank you for your time tonight. It's been my pleasure getting to know you a little bit and learning a little bit of your journey. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great. I obviously love everything about Vandy. I watched all the games, and I just want to stay close to the program as much as I can.
Well, we sure appreciate you helping us as we do each week. We have conversations with Commodores. We're telling the oral history of the program. We're sharing our journeys, which are just so fascinating, person to person, and yours as well. I certainly wish you the best of luck with your naval career and continuing to be up in the air protecting us, and hopefully one day doing a flyover for a Vanderbilt home game. So thank you, Tommy. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, guys, as we do each Tuesday night, 7 o'clock Central, we continue. Anchor down. Y'all have a good week. See you next week. Bye.